Johnson wanted to befriend the movement, but King was difficult for him. Martin was not an inside Washington guy. You know, Johnson loved to deal with people. He was a checkers player. He moved these people around. He couldn't move Martin around that way. And then there was Hoover, always sitting on Johnson's ear, spilling poison in it about Martin.
J. Edgar Hoover was the original director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. J. Edgar Hoover was more popular than most presidents.
Dr. King was threatening to the America that Mr. Hoover believed in and saw and wanted.
Hoover, I think, had a pathological hatred of black people. And he just couldn't stand Martin.
And his biggest tool was the communist bugaboo. As a matter of fact, he persuaded Bobby Kennedy that he just had to have the right to tap Dr. King, tap his phones, and put him on under excruciating surveillance.
When we heard that Martin won the Nobel Peace Prize, he was in St. Joseph's Hospital, downtown Atlanta. I went down there immediately, and he was saying when Coretta had called him and told him about it, he thought he was dreaming.
A month later, J. Edgar Hoover comes out of nowhere saying that Dr. King is the most notorious liar in the country. That made the front pages, and that phrase came out, but it was a long diatribe on what a nasty person, and if I could only tell you how nasty he is.
Dr. King believed deeply in what he was about, what the movement was about. So for someone to say he was the most notorious liar was simply deeply hurtful. And I know that he was wounded by that.
When I called Dr. King in Atlanta and tried to set up a meeting between the two men, he did not respond to my calls. He waited 3, 4, 5 days, and finally I got a call from Andrew Young.
It was Andy, myself, Dr. King with us as well. We went to the FBI office. It turned out to be a rather amusing meeting because we had come to have him explain to us why he would go public and say that Dr. King was the most notorious liar in the country. And he never addressed the question. He just took us through a little lecture on what the FBI is trying to do and how they're trying to protect the rights of all citizens. Yeah.
You know, he had these black guys in his office whom he called agents. One of them agented him out of his coat every day and then would agent him back into his coat every day. One guy drove him around. Hoover believed that this black population, uneducated, poor, downtrodden, was particularly susceptible to manipulation by communists. And in a sense, he was right. There were communists in the civil rights movement who played an extremely helpful role. They weren't always the people he thought they were, and they didn't always do the things he thought they did. He was wrong to suspect that these people somehow were hostile to the best interest of the United States.
From Washington, D.C., Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr., President of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, will face the nation.
Dr. King, it's been alleged that you have been slow to sever your ties with alleged communists in the civil rights movement, even after government officials have warned you against them.
First, I'd like to say that communism is based on an ethical relativism, a metaphysical materialism, a denial of human freedom, and a crippling totalitarianism that I could never accept. The only person that they identified that had any connection with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was removed. He's been off of our staff a long, long time.
Well, this places you in the direct opposite position of the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, J. Edgar Hoover, who gave some testimony recently to the contrary.
I would hope that the FBI would come out and say something that I think is much more significant, and that is that it is amazing that so few Negroes have turned to communism in the light of that desperate plight. I think it is one of the amazing developments of the 20th century, how loyal the Negro has remained to America in spite of his long night of oppression and discrimination.
FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover put it in perspective when he said, in his testimony before the House Appropriations Committee in 1962,
"Since its inception, the Communist Party, USA, has been alert on every possible issue or event which could be used to exploit the American Negro in furtherance of party aims."
We most certainly do not and will not give protection to civil rights workers. In the first place, the FBI is not a police organization. It's purely an investigative organization, and the protection of individual citizens, either natives of the state or coming into the state, is a matter for the local authorities. The FBI will not participate in any such protection.
But the FBI can make arrests, on-the-spot arrests. They do it in many other cases where you have narcotics, auto thefts, bank robberies. It's only when you come to civil rights that there is this tendency to be rather slow. But I'm not...
Hoover was shocked that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. would dare to criticize the Bureau. He ordered his agents to bug King's motel rooms, where they recorded alleged extramarital affairs.
He actually played those tapes for reporters. Hoover was obsessed with King. He wanted to bring King down as a leader. Why that was, I think, was because he criticized the Bureau. The fact that Dr. King was black and criticized the Bureau probably made it that much worse.
When King was chosen for the Nobel Peace Prize in October 1964, it was almost more than Edgar could stand. A dogmatic Hoover protege named William Sullivan, head of domestic intelligence, went so far as to send copies of the surveillance tapes to King's home in Atlanta. Included inside was an anonymous threat. The letter ended with a sinister suggestion saying, quote, "There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation."
Did you know right away that it was from the FBI?
Sure. It really was tragic that anybody in official circles would sink to such depths.
Well, I listened to the tape and I didn't find anything on there that, you know, that appeared to be anything like that.
Today, Coretta Scott King is speaking for the first time about the sexual allegations the FBI was using to try and destroy her husband.
I feel so strongly because Martin and I never had one argument about a woman. Not one.
What is the truth?
As far as I'm concerned, I don't know of any relationship that my husband had. Not saying that there weren't some, because nobody's a saint, but I don't know of any. Martin was not a promiscuous man. He was not that kind of a man.
Martin Luther King was the kind of man who managed to keep his family sealed away from the dangers he faced.
We felt so safe and so protected and very secure.
He expected that he would be killed. He thought that ultimately it was going to be because of his opposition to the war in Vietnam, and perhaps more importantly because of his tremendous commitment to bring economic justice to this republic. Because when he entered that fray, when he began to talk about the redistribution of wealth, you have to understand he was coming up against the most powerful forces in this land.
We have stood up for nonviolence with all of our hearts, and those who will make this peaceful revolution impossible will make a violent revolution inevitable.
And it didn't cost the nation one penny to integrate lunch counters. Well, it didn't cost the nation one penny to guarantee the right to vote. But now we are dealing with issues that cannot be solved without the nation spending billions of dollars and undergoing a radical redistribution of economic power.
Bill Moyers, when he was a leading White House aide in the LBJ administration, was one of the individuals that circulated a monograph which was full of red-baiting material about Martin Luther King that turns out now to be totally scurrilous, suggesting that this great intellectual was a dupe of Moscow, and that this white former communist sympathizer was leading him around by the nose. I mean, it's vicious racism